Hey everybody, happy Monday, happy Black History Month. If you're joining us live, I hope your morning or afternoon or evening, wherever you are, it's off to a great start. My name is Minda Harts and I'm the host of Secure the Seat Live. I only hop on here now for special occasions and have a celebration conversation with my good friend El Michelle Smith, who I'm sure you've read her previous books, but we're going to get into her book that's out next week, which I think is so timely in terms of our leadership blueprint, ways that we can be leaders. And let me tell you firsthand, you don't have to have a title before or after your name to be a leader. We all have the responsibility to show up in that way. I know there's been a lot going on in the world, and I hope that you are still finding your joy. I hope you are still going after those dreams. I hope that you are learning to talk to each other even nicer. I think that this is a place where trust is few and far between these days, but we get to create that leadership. We get to create that trust. And maybe people aren't experiencing it globally or in your community, but we get to at least show people and demonstrate what trust and what good could look like when people interact with us. Right. So I'm excited today for the conversation. For those who are watching us on LinkedIn, hey, hey, hey. For those on Facebook and YouTube, make sure that you dive into the comments. We're going to have a fast and furious conversation, but I want you to say your amens, get your tambourines. I know we're going to have some moments, and so we'll take some questions after. I'm going to bring my friend up to the stage. Hey, girl. Hey.
Hey, Linda, it's so good to see you, and thanks so much for having me on your show.
I am so excited for people to learn more about this important book. I got an early copy and I've been just plowing through it. And so, I was just so excited when I saw that you were coming out with call and response, because I think it's something that we don't talk enough about, which is the Black church and those early leadership that many of us experienced what
Yes.
leadership, quote unquote, looked like in that time period. But for those who may not be familiar with your work, I'd love for people to hear about who you are from your mouth.
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity. And I'm so glad that you have plowed in the call and response. And a lot of people may be thinking, well, why are we talking about the Black church? Well, it has a lot to do with where I'm situated in the leadership conversation. And I like to say that I approach leadership from the apex of applied sciences and culture, which means that from a cultural perspective, my definition of a culture is anything that makes your squad a squad. So while I'm looking at this cultural institution this time around, you may see me look at sports the next time or music the next time. It really is that content or that understanding or values that everyone gathers around on your squad. So just for that. And then for the applied sciences, I got my coach training in positive psychology and neuroscience. So I'm informed in both of those areas. And my past books actually leverage those two sciences extremely often in order to not just share experiences from these wonderful corporate leaders that I highlight in my book and also in my story, but then also to share with you some of those next steps that are grounded in evidence that say this is really what proves out this experience. So that's what we're seeing here. We're going to see culture and history proven out by applied sciences so that we get this leadership theory that's modern, shiny, and new, and gives us words for what we experienced in the past.
That part. And El Michelle has a really great podcast called Culture Soup. I've been on there a couple times. So if you want to get some more to dig deeper, but let's jump right in next week, next Tuesday to be exact.
Yes.
Your new book comes out. I'm dropping the links in the chat. Pre-order is so important. You all know, if you've watched me for any amount of time, I always say pre-order. It's not just a fun thing that authors like to say. It matters.
It matters.
It matters. That is our first week record sales and all the things, right, in
Yes.
other genres. So it's really important that we support. But one of the things that I wanted to pose in terms of trust, because I
Mm-hmm.
think right now a lot of people, even the church used to be the place that we trusted, right,
Used
and
to be.
it used to be, and now we're not sure if we trust in the same ways that we did before. And so, call and response, you described the church as an early leadership incubator. where we first get those traditions, right, of trust. But what do modern leaders often misunderstand when trust actually forms?
Sure, sure. So yeah, we're calling the Black church the original business school, especially for people like you and me. And I think, Minda, you're also PK. So you know very well firsthand, but we weren't able to put words around what we experienced. And for some of us, it just seemed like home. It seemed very regular. It seemed very, to some, old fashioned. And, we've got our big box churches these days that don't really go with a lot of the traditions. And yes, there are some aspects of this institution and the broader church institution that have raised issues of trust in it as an organization. But to get to your question, as we start to look at how trust is formed, it's very basic, and that's what's so neat about this book, because it's foundational. And what we're seeing is there's a lot of self work that needs to happen. There's a lot of self accountability in this book, understanding your purpose, self mastery. If you can't be authentic and understand who you are, how in the world can you, show up authentically and allow people to trust you, right? And then there's that relationship work that happens. I think what's really key in this book to pull out for people in corporate and professional environments is that it's not just enough to be a team. You have to form some community, and some of that is formed through collaboration. And again, that's very foundational to what we saw, especially historically, as the Black church moved to pull together the civil rights movement. Community is interesting because, as you probably found out in your research for Talk to Me Nice, is that there is a bond that is important that separates a team from a community. And that bond really is this hormone that's in our brain called oxytocin. It's called the bonding hormone. It may be called the love hormone. You may even see it called the trust hormone. And it's emitted when people come together around shared values and shared experiences. Now, what makes it different in the Black church? There's a term in science called social cohesion, and that talks about it's talking about the bond that Black people have and have had generation over generation through shared adversity. Okay, now let's go back to the community at large. First of all, that shared experience through adversity is so important. And while we're not wishing poorly on anyone, it isn't until a team goes through something together and has a shared experience that causes them to bond. We're not talking about pizza parties or wind down Wednesdays. We're talking about actual things that matter, things that count. That's the bond that begins to form. Now, when it comes to Black folks, you've probably seen and wondered, if you're outside of our community, what causes us to show up in a space, whether it's virtual or even in person, and we all seem to know what the other one is saying or doing and how to join in. There's a video going viral right now of a young woman that is saying, you know what we need to do now? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. And then what we need to do? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And everybody in the comments is like, I heard exactly what you're saying. And it's true. That's that social cohesion and that bond that we have generation over generation. It's etched on our DNA. It's called epigenetics. And because of that, when we show up in institutions like the Black church, on Black Twitter, wherever it might be, we seem to know the cues before anything's being said. And that's the kind of community and collaboration we should be aiming for in the workplace.
Amen, amen, and amen. I mean that is so true, and I have not seen that meme going viral, but I love that people are.
I'm going to tag you because it's funny.
Yeah, tag me in that. But I mean that's so important, and I think sometimes we forget that what trust and what leadership should be rooted in, right? And it is
Yes.
those we sometimes I think, especially in the Black community, we may take for granted those verbal and nonverbal cues that really root us in the trust, right? Like you show up in a space and we know that look, right?
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
you know
And
that. Oh, go for it.
and someone may be looking at this and going, "You talk about trust in the Black church? I have had trauma. I've had my form of trauma with this institution. And just like any other institution, how many of us have been involved in corporate America and been burned? We've all been burned somewhere. But let me tell you why that trust gets burned. It's because the values that you say you uphold, you're not actually living by or walking by. So that gets back to that self accountability. And if everybody is accountable for themselves, guess what happens? The trust is formed and you understand where someone else may be trying to take you and you're willing to follow.
Well said. I also want to dig into your new book, Call and Response, which comes out next week. Make
Yes.
sure you pre-order it now. But the framework is rooted in mutual responsibility. How does that dynamic create trust differently than the top-down leadership models that many of us still either work in or rely on?
Right. So, one of the 10 leadership lessons that's in the book, towards the end of the book, is economic empowerment. And what's interesting about that concept is that underneath that idea is some science that talks about power with over power over. And what we saw demonstrated, and we still see demonstrated in many Black churches today, is that as much as the church is there for the community at large, externally, it's also there for its members. So we saw examples of churches, Black churches in the 50s and 60s, creating the first credit unions in the community for Black people, for their members, and also the community at large. What we were seeing is, and what we still see today is, this is someone, i.e., a pastor, that came into the understanding that if I share power with the community and within my church organization, I make the whole organism stronger. Now, if it's power over, which we've seen a lot of examples of these days, you will see where the people feel weakened. They feel out of touch. They feel like they don't have autonomy. They feel like they don't have agency, and the trust is broken. We're back to the trust again. So, power with over power over. Try that with your teams and see the shift in the dynamic of how people step up and actually want to lead too.
For the people in the back. It's
Amen.
so amen. Can we get an amen in the chat?
Yes.
I think this is important. And I also, granted, we are coincidentally in Black History Month, but I also, like you said, a lot of people might be thinking, well, what does this have to do with
Yes.
today? Right.
Hmm.
And it's very, very, a lot of us show up in the workplace today based off of these frameworks that
Look,
we have been inundated with, right? And that
exactly.
top-down hierarchy. And I think it's important to marinate and assess
Hmm.
what we want to take out of what we've been accustomed to and what we need to do differently, right? And I know that your book hones in on a lot of those things, and I think sometimes where the rub for people in church, especially those who grew up in Black church or are still going to Black church, accountability is often framed as punitive, right?
Yes. Hmm.
In the stories you share, how did accountability function as a trust building practice after, rather than a control mechanism? Because I think we also, when you talk about sin and all these different
Hmm.
variables that fall into it, I would love for you to shed some light on that.
Right. So the leaders that are in the book, the Carla Harrises of Morgan Stanley, the Heather Dowdys of Netflix, you got Sent Marshall from the Dallas Mavericks, formerly of the Dallas Mavericks and AT&T, a former colleague of mine. What we see in common with all of these leaders is that they're not just purpose driven, they're also self accountable. That's the difference between the accountability that we usually talk about, where it's finger wagging and it's pointed at someone else. This accountability is pointing right back at yourself. And what we understand to be true is many of these leaders got this self accountability through an intrinsic motivation. Here we are with the positive psychology again. An intrinsic motivation because they were aligned with the purpose. They understood that if they did what they said they were going to do, showed up when they said they were going to show up, followed through and delivered the way they were expected to deliver, that would generate the kind of trust and the kind of bonding, I would say, that is needed, not just in the church, but elsewhere. We're really talking about creating more heart centered leadership and getting back to that during a time where trust is being broken when it comes to return to office. We've got some very harsh ultimatums going on out there. We've got really inhumane layoffs happening. We've got people who are burnt out from seeing all of this around them, even if it hasn't quite happened to them. And suddenly we're trying to figure out, how do we move forward? And the idea is that we need to revive. Yes, it's a pun. We need a leadership revival here, getting back to those foundational areas, because sometimes you got to look back in order to look forward. Yes, she got her tambourine. That's what I'm talking about. Well, you know what? Let me add one more thing, Linda, if you don't mind.
Please do.
Yeah. So if you're out there and you're like, I don't go to church, okay? I'm not even Black. What does this got to do with me? The beautiful thing about it is, when I bring in this social science, the applied science, the neuroscience, the brain science, it gives us language and also a framework that you can apply and build muscle into. All of these leadership theories that I've learned throughout this work are leadership theories that you will find in Harvard Business Review, in your latest Fortune magazine, all of the leadership authorities. But what's so beautiful about it is, it was there all along. And many of us didn't recognize it until we had our very own aha moments, which I had myself.
Well, I don't want to put you on the spot, Michelle, but I think bringing it back to, like you said, some people may not go to church. They, we said church and they automatically put earmuffs
Right?
on, right? But there's a lot that we can extract from those early, like you said, early leadership school. And as we know, as leadership, as spaces evolve, we have to adapt new tools, right? And you're also giving us the tools that we can take in call and response. And I'm wondering, for those leaders listening who sense that trust is hanging on by a thread on their team, right? I mean, like you said, return to work, layoffs, maybe you promised something to someone last year, you can't follow through with it, so now you're kind of workplace ghosting them. Trust is hanging on by a thread, right? Call and response is inviting us to have an internal shift. And what is that you invite them to make? What does that internal shift look like? If you can just delve in. I know you've given us little Costco samples along the way throughout your answers, but for those who are like, this is where I am today and I need that additional kind of mindset shift.
Yes. Sometimes in times like these, it's very tempting to get quiet. And when you see something that's not right, not say something. Chapter 8 in the book is all about social justice, or social impact, if you'd like to use it in your corporate environment. They both have the same roots. And when you have the courage, that's what we're talking about here, the courage to see something and say something, that builds trust, because you're fair-minded in what you're seeing and what you're doing. And it's not just enough sometimes just to watch it happen. It's not just enough just to point it out sometimes. Sometimes you have to do something. And that is one of the things that separates a heart centered leader, like the ones that I just named and some of the others that are in the book, and those that are, just leaders, managers, people just doing the work. There is a sense of bravery and running to the risk, which makes us transformational leaders. And what's interesting, I bring up St. Marshall a lot because I know her very well. And, she was known for diversity, equity, and inclusion and turning the Mavericks around. But the one thing that I think people miss about her is this underlying, unmistakable commitment to accountability, holding herself accountable. It automatically causes people to mirror the behavior. And that's science too. That's psychology. When you show up and you walk that talk, people are more inclined to do the same. So accountability, social impact, the courage to call a thing and do something, and then also building that community. Those are three Those are three of the leadership lessons that you can take. Again, community isn't just a team, it's finding ways and experiences to find a common connection, bond, and move forward. That's when you start to move intuitively. That's when the emotional intelligence and emotional literacy kicks in, and you begin to sense what the other person wants to do and is about to do. It's that attunement, it's the neural coupling that happens in the call and response.
Mm. I love that so much. You're taking us to school on this Monday morning or afternoon, depending on when you're watching us. But I had a question come through and ask, why did you choose the title Call and Response?
That's a very good question. I'm so glad you asked. So, I needed a title that not only shouted out the gut bucket gospel singers that we know so well, but also called out those ministers in the pulpit, but also was a great analogy for what leadership actually is. If you know what call and response actually is, and it's not just something you find in the church, you will find it in hip hop. In fact, Curtis Blow was the first commercially recognized rapper to use call and response in the song The Breaks. You will find that hip hop and churchyism are all through this book. So check that out. But then going all the way back to where it comes from, sub Saharan Africa, in the deepest roots of the motherland, where people doing their work were singing their songs. And guess how it got to the United States? The Middle Passage. Shout out to Black History Month. We're on the Middle Passage. We're an enslaved people, but we bring our traditions with us. And so into the fields we go, into the plantations we go, singing our songs, saying what we say, and doing a call and response. And for those who don't know, a call and response is simply a word and a saying from the leader with a response from the group, a word, a saying, or a shout. And that's what a and a response actually is. And this book is actually a call and response. I don't serve up solutions in this book. I serve up what the current condition is and what we're looking at when it comes to a dwindling pipeline from the pews to corporate America. Because what we found was 76% of the 155 high performing Black leaders, all fellows from the Executive Leadership Council, that they found that their first leadership experiences happened in the Black church. So I wanted to know, well, what else did we learn? And this came from an aha moment that I had too. What else did we learn? So I uncovered 10 of these leadership lessons, but with the idea that I would share them with everyone else, because this is the kind of leader, Black, white, yellow, purple, that we need today. A heart centered leader that will run to the risk, be brave, be creative, and have emotional intelligence.
Period.
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 My daughter would say, clock it.
I was thinking about when I started to read Call and Response, it really took me back to a time where I didn't necessarily look at the leadership qualities, right? And I think about probably the first time I felt like a leader is during I grew up for a good portion in a Baptist church, and if you remember Sunday school, anybody out there, you sometimes got up in front of everybody and you were the one that either said the Bible verse,
Yes.
right? And I remember being asked right in front of the congregation to read that or to memorize and say that Bible verse. And that was, I felt like, oh, they trust me, right?
Yes.
They see something in me to lead during this time. You know, it's not just the person in the pulpit, but also, you know, our deacons, our ushers, you know, all of the people that have a role to make sure that we are cultivated and steward in the ways that we are. And lastly, I would love for people for those who know what a good call and response, if there's any that kind of come to mind when you are thinking about our conversation, drop it in the chat. But for me, God is good, right?
All the time.
And again, when people trust you, when they feel comfortable, you're going to get that. You know, whether you're at a Beyonce concert, you're in the boardroom, right? When somebody asks a question, and okay, nobody's answering it, but then somebody takes that leadership role and asks the first question. But I'm just rambling now.
I'm so glad you said that, though, because one of the things that's important about this book, it is not a religious text. I am not there to share Jesus with you. That is not it. Maybe in a different venue, but not this book. Okay. This book is there to share with you some nuggets that we got from a tradition that many of us didn't even realize we got until now. And now that I'm having these conversations, people are finding language for it, and they're beginning to reflect and say, "Oh yeah, that was me too." But it's also a way to say, even some of our government leaders, some of politicians, we've seen them, people who know how to do a good speaking opportunity. They know how to use the call and response. And chapter 3 in the book is all about speaking and storytelling. And I'm telling you, when you've seen this modeled before you, year over year as a child, before you know it as an adult, you're standing up and you're doing those things yourself. Now, maybe you're not hooping, but you probably understand that presence and showmanship is very important in grabbing people's attention and grabbing and pulling them in.
Absolutely. And I know that, again, we're talking about the Black church, but this isn't like it could be found in your church bookstore, but that's not what it is. A leadership book. It is it is a business
It probably, I mean, depending. Some of these big box churches might put it in their bookstores, but you're going to find it on, in Hudson's and
Yeah.
Books A Million, and it's in the leadership business aisle, which makes it groundbreaking in and of itself.
I mean, I was so glad when I saw that you were coming out with this book, because I think we do separate the church and state when it comes to that, right? But there are so many principles that I think is so important. So again, whether you grew up in a Christian church or a Baptist church or a Muslim church or no church at all, this book is for you, because we're talking about those leadership principles, heart-centered leadership. And I think at a time like this, we need leaders who people can trust, right? Yes. That if I say, "Hey, follow me," you're willing to take that road with me, because I've demonstrated I have enough in the trust bank account to demonstrate that, right? And I think it's so important that we sharpen our leadership skills as well, right? And I feel like this book it takes us back to our roots and reminds us, many of us, that we've been leaders from inception, right? And what we're able to do in the world around us. But I want to give you the final say, El Michelle, in terms of just what do you want people to get out of this book? Use it. Obviously, we want people to pre-order for themselves, for their book clubs, for the organizations. But it's so timely, especially, again, Black History Month, where history is trying to be erased in many regards. And I felt like it was so important for us to double down on our leadership in this time.
Yes. One of my friends who's in academia, she's a professor at Texas Christian University, where I got my undergrad and graduate degree and actually served on faculty for a while on a board and what have you, says to me, when I was reading this book, I was excited about it, because as much as it was about you in pigtails running down the halls away from the Sunday school superintendent so that you didn't have to make Sunday school, you're peppering in these exciting and important leadership lessons that we need today that are grounded in evidence. And I think that's the one thing that everyone should take away from this, that you can take an organization or an organism like this cultural institution and find good in it, and find not just good, but, those leadership lessons that you can take into the world, because other people have. And until this day, they weren't really even sure where it came from. And now we know. So it's exciting to have broken ground in this way, in this work, during this time frame, the 100th anniversary of Black history. I mean, I couldn't have planned it myself. That was pretty good, right? But there's also some learning there, and some of my biggest, most vocal fans of this book, early readers, are not Black, and some of them not even Christian. So I invite you. The doors of the church are open.
Listen, I was going to say, the doors of the church are open. Come on down, okay?
Yeah.
The
Exactly.
work is playing in the background. You know what time it is. And let's lean in. Let's have book clubs. Let's have thoughtful conversation. One of the things that I also loved about call and response is it fed my intellectual appetite, right?
Yes,
So it's
wonky.
and I love it so much, and I'm just glad that you are sharing it, because we do need those heart-centered leadership moments, and we do need to be reminded of where we came from and where we're going. So yeah,
So much, Minda.
where can people find you, book you, buy the book? I've been sharing it
Yes.
in the chat, but
I
want to
try
make
to
sure that
make it easy for everybody. It's one-stop shop. If you go to lmichellesmith.com, and that's Michelle with two L's, slash call and response, spell out and, you'll find everything you need. You can connect with me socially. You can bulk order books for your book club, for your team or organization, for your church. In fact, this framework that I have, the Leadership Revival Framework, it has two tracks: one for ministries and one for professional organizations and universities. So I encourage you to go on that site. You could pre-order or meet me in the market. I'm about to go on a book tour.
Yes. So go to the website, because you can find out exactly where she's going to be. She's going to be in these streets, both in person and the internet. So make sure you get there. And one of the questions I love to ask my guests
Mhm.
before you part is, what's one thing that people can do differently today, starting their leadership journey, making the workplace or any space that they walk into better than they found it as they go into this week?
It's a wonderful, powerful question.
And what would you offer for them?
Yeah, you know what? I think it's important that self mastery piece. There I said there are three aspects to this framework: self work, relationship work, and world work. But it all starts with that self mastery, understanding who you are when you show up in a space, how you impact the people in the space, what can you do in that space, to impact everyone else, but then understanding how to be resilient and where those resiliency aspects come from. What in your story makes you you? This book really is my story, peppered with some great stories of other people. But yeah, we bring in the science and the leadership theory and make it really rigorous. But it really is about who these people are at the core. Because if you don't know who you are, how will anyone else know? You got to start there.
Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for your new book. It comes out next Tuesday. I'm excited to follow along on your book tour and dive in more. And for those of you, we're celebrating Black History Month. We, again, um, every day is a cultural moment. Every day we should honor communities who have given so much to the country that we all live in. And I hope you will. If you this is a moment that I have to share,
Sure.
Elma, is last year there weren't a lot of organizations that celebrated Black history
Mm,
for various
that's
reasons,
true.
right? And I hope that if you want to make the workplace better than you found it, you want to enhance trust with all communities, I hope that you will, if you have an opportunity, have community, have events,
Yes.
celebrate the Black employees and the Black experience in your church, in your organizations. Maybe budgets have been tight, maybe things have been cut, but we don't have to do nothing. There are
Yeah.
still things to be able to do. And I think that buying this book, having the conversations, celebrating your colleagues, your leaders, your Black leaders is very important. So whether you do that today, you should want to do it every day, because we want to build trust with our colleagues. One of my trust languages is acknowledgement, and we need
Yeah.
to acknowledge that, right, El Michelle?
Right. Absolutely. I'm so glad you said that. And I'm very encouraged to see more corporations and professional organizations reaching out for, especially for a book like this that is pretty in your face. We're having Black History Month. So what? Right? We're having it. I'm very happy to see those corporate spaces reaching out and doing this. But I also want to say to the Black employees out there, Black leaders out there. We got to lean into our culture sometimes. And one thing that I've seen some of these corporate ERGs that got nixed last year doing is underground. Look, we we know about the D9. We know how to go underground. And things can still happen. And that's all I have to say about that.
That's all we have to say on that. So listen, thank you for your time. I know that you could be online anywhere in the world, but you came here with us. So if you're watching us live, thank you so much. If you're watching us later, we appreciate you too. We hope that you will think about what call and response means in your own leadership life. Hope that you get the book. Michelle, it's always a pleasure seeing you. So proud of you, rooting for you. And let's run up the book, y'all. Let's make sure we do that. And happy Black History to each and every one of you. I'll pop on throughout the month of February, but we are what the world needs right now. Our leadership matters. Your leadership matters. And keep talking to each other nice. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you, Minda. Bye, everybody.